Hello, lovely people. Come on in. I've got a really bad frog in my throat. I'm so sorry. I'm hoping that will disappear very soon. Hope everyone's okay. If you don't forget, if you want to say anything, write in the chat down the side. Chat away, say hello on the side, and then I will sort the rest of it out. Just gonna make sure that people can't unmute themselves and make sure that people can't start whiteboards. That's all. So welcome. Hello, Caris. Hi, Ash. Good evening to everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Just going to see how many people we've got in, and then we'll take it from there. Jerry, you all right if I make you a co-host? Oh, dear. What a frog. No, me, I'll be losing my voice. That'd be good. Hi, Knox. Nice to see everybody. So we just see how many other people come in. Poppy might not make it in today. She has just really hurt herself, and so she just needs to go to bed and look after herself. Update caught me out. What's like a Zoom update was that, Ropes? Evening Explorer, even good to be here. Happy to have you. Goddess Coco, good evening and welcome. I'm going to squeak my way through this, I can tell. Yeah. It caught me out. When I did it, I couldn't work out how to do chat and other things for a while. Hello, Miss Birds. Nice to see you all. We are recording. Please make sure you have the right name out. Please make sure that you are seen the way you want to be seen, because I do put these out on, they go onto YouTube and they go onto FetLife as well. So please just be careful. I do warn everyone.
What life?
Whatever that is, that weird place. That weird place where we all go. No cam for me today. Fair enough. Lex, hello. I could turn my camera off. I feel like it. I haven't been able to wash my hair in about 5 days. I can only get it done because I've had
Well, you're not going to moan about your bloody ear, are you?
Yeah, I had skin cancer cut out of my ear, and the hole was bigger than my little fingernail, with a little bit more to the side. And he stitched it together, and he said to me, "So there will be a deformity." And I'm like, what am I going to look like, an elf? I'm feeling quite excited now. And then he showed me, and it was so negligible. I was like, "Oh, it's not going to be a big problem, is it?" Oh, thanks. Can't tell. What you mean? I always look like shit. Thanks a lot, Ropes. It's fine, isn't it? Anyway, so as I say, I don't think Poppy's coming in. She's not well. I think she's going to bed, and that's where she should stay. That would be really good for her. So apologies, you've just got me. We are talking today about yes and no, but before we go on to that, can I please ask that I just cover some rules? And thanks, Ash. And so everyone knows what they're doing. Oh, is it your first meeting? Welcome, Goddess Coco. How exciting, coming to the first one. What I say is, please don't talk or raise your hand. You shouldn't be able to. And Kalapa as well. Welcome. Some of us know each other and some of us don't. Some of us know each other in real life, and some people I've never met before, and some people are really familiar faces and come in all the time. And we can get anywhere from like 20 to 100 people in. And during COVID and that time, lockdown, it was sometimes 150. So it's a real variety of numbers. And it varies. What I ask is that if you put your video on, please be dressed. Please do not be naked. Oh my gosh, lots. Hello, Lex. It's interesting. Please do not be naked. No wanking. You'll be surprised. I've had a couple. We have to chuck them out. I'm sure they like that humiliation. And Nessie, welcome from New Zealand. And Jim from Cornwall, welcome. So please do not chat to anybody. You can say hello, who's here, but do not comment. So like if you turn and say, like I know Caris, if I say, "Oh, Caris, you're looking particularly beautiful today," or if I say, "Oh, Caris, you're looking particularly tired today," neither of those are good, even though one sounds like it's good. So again, please do not comment on what anybody looks like. This isn't a chat up room. Please don't private message anybody. I think I've turned that off anyway, so you can't. So I'm really aware that this is not therapy, but it is a therapeutic space where we talk about things to learn about. And if you've got something to say, please write it down the side and I will write it down for you. This isn't a pickup joint. As I say, this isn't sexual. It's purely a little bit of learning where we can all share some bits and pieces as well. So again, we're talking about yes and no today, and we're talking about a few things connected to that. The power of yes, the power of no. We're going to be talking about boundaries. We're going to be talking about why people are people pleasers, maybe why they fawn, and we'll talk about fawning. And we're going to talk a little bit about values and authenticity and goals and boundaries. And then retroactive withdrawal of consent and the impact of saying yes or saying no at the wrong time and the reasons and the impact that they have, and the accountability and responsibility around that, especially in kink and in polyamory, because that's the basis of most of these meetings alongside mental health. If you are a professional or a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, any of those things, anything with psych in front of it, you can write to me and ask for a CPD certificate, and I will give you one for free. And that's normally about 65 quid an hour. So just write to me on FetLife or email me. I can put my email address up in a bit. I really can't remember where I got them from. Thank you very much. Probably those ones you mean. They were from some kind of La Redoute or some kind of French company, but that's roughly where they're from. But thanks. Everything in my house is grey, a little bit of white, and mainly orange, because, you know, my ADHD has a colour obsession that says you must have orange of everything. So everything around me is mainly orange, even my glasses. Right, so let's talk about yes and no. What would you like to get out of today about yes and no? Do you have any ideas about what you want to get? If we were at the end, what do you want to say you've got? Or are you happy for me to ramble on and see if I cover what you want to hear? Let's have a
Well,
think.
assertiveness is always useful. When to say no, when you feel pressured to say yes, and vice versa.
So some reasons for that, some pressures for that, or some systems, what you could use?
Techniques more than anything else, I guess.
So a few techniques. So if I forget techniques, remind me about 10 minutes before the end, and we can go into quite a few as well. We will definitely do that. Kara says, ramble away. Okay. So for me, yes and no is like an episode of sliding doors. A yes and a no changes your life in any moment when you see it through. You saying yes to this workshop means that you are here. Some people said yes and don't come along. Some people say no and they might miss something, or they might not, and they might think nothing of it. But yes and no have a lot of power if you think about it. And we need to be present to be able to say yes or no. People saying ramble will ask as it comes up, which is great. Thank you. And Coco agrees. Elle says, regarding no, I recently had an experience where, because my no wasn't stern, but it was playful instead, it wasn't taken seriously. Could you talk about different ways of saying no? Absolutely. Talk about techniques and being heard, and maybe why we're not heard as well, because it is important. So there are a number of layers and realities of when we say yes and no, and the impact of what happens and how they are. And there are positives and negatives that come from saying yes and no to different things. So why is it important? Well, it's about our authority. It's about our okayness. It's about our power, our ability to say yes or no. When our power is taken away, when we're talking about abuse or different things, or we feel like we can't control things like anorexia are definitely developed when someone feels out of control and they can say no to food, for example. That makes a real difference to someone's status and well-being in that moment. But then actually they lose power because they're saying no to everything, even if they want to say yes. So it's really important, and we often disempower ourselves daily, or we empower ourselves daily in the way we use yes or no. We're also not very good as human beings in owning whether our yes and no's are clear, on getting our yes and no's heard and being absolutely clear as a statement, or dressing our yes and no's because of how people may feel, how we might influence them, whether they'll like us because we've said it, whether it's a yes or a no. So emotions really power our yes and no's, because how we feel, how we are, the energy that we have, it's going to influence whether I say yes or no. If I'm having a bad day, it might influence whether I'm saying yes or no, or if I'm struggling. So that makes a real difference. So we have to understand that a lot of our emotions, there's a wonderful TED talk by Lisa Feldman Barrett, really worth looking up as a TED talk. She talks about not being at the mercy of your emotions, not being under their power, because they're all about patterns. So in your life, if you've had a pattern of always hearing the word no, or always hearing the word yes, or being forced into things that you didn't want to do as a child, or being the diplomat in your household, like let's say your parents were always arguing, or a brother was always arguing, or somebody was violent or angry, we might be more of a people pleaser than not, or if somebody was addicted. I love that talk too. It's a wonderful talk. Thanks for the link. Perfect. And what she talks about in that talk is how we find our patterns and how much our patterns inform us. So I think sometimes it's a really interesting exercise to actually say, hang on a second, do I actually want to say yes, or do I actually want to say no right now? What do I really want? And how much of that want is influenced by our past and our patterns versus our real core values, our real core morals, our own ethics, so that we feel differently. What does that mean to me? And I think that's really important. And if you often hear people talking about the past and what happened, if you go home to your family over Christmas and they say, oh, Christmas is always such a wonderful time, but you say, fucking hell, I hate Christmas here. You're all a bunch of cunts and it's all too much for me and I can't handle it. And I really need to go for a walk. But we keep saying yes to Christmas because everyone says it's so fucking lovely. We don't really want to say yes, but we say yes because we should. That's me, Christmas. Sorry. It's just a classic example, isn't it? You know, I invite my kids every year and I'm thinking, oh God, do they want to come? What do they really think? And it is quite hard because we think of things differently. We are like, if you are there and I am here and our heads are the middle of a flower and our petals overcross, the reality is that tiny crossover. They're the facts. The bigger part of the petal is my perception of reality, and yours is a bigger part. So where our perceptions meet are fairly different. So people have very strong opinions on that yes and on that no. It's also fucking wonderful to be able to say yes or no. But we often really worry about consequence, because there is a consequence. So let's have a look at the word no, and then let's have a little bit of a look at the word yes. Do we say yes to keep people happy? I think you need to ask, do I say yes to keep people happy? Definitely sometimes in my life I've done that. I think within reason, we all do it a little bit, and that can be okay. We don't have to be utter cunts to the world. We don't have to be horrible to people. Let's go with Christmas. Like I don't want to be a Scrooge. However, I might want some time out. There is a balance. And of course, we do some things to keep some people happy some of the time. The world would not go round if we didn't. The important thing to think about there is at what cost. We always have to weigh up the benefits and the consequences. So it's like a profit and loss account to say, if I keep saying yes, how much of me is left? And one of my favorite things, which I feel very strongly about, is if all you ever do is say yes, what is that yes really worth? Like, what's the worth of your yes if it's what you say? Let's take submission. It's a really good example. If you say yes to everybody that comes along, whatever they want to do to you, how can I trust you in a relationship? If you say yes to what everyone wants to do with you, how can I know that you're going to be safe? If you say yes to everyone that comes along, how do I know that you're going to live through the next experience or not catch something that really makes you quite ill or not very well and can impact the rest of your life? It's really important to learn to say no. And with a lot of people and a lot of my clients, we do lots of no exercises. One no exercise that's really lovely, it's a really simple one to think of, is in the next 2 weeks, say no 3 times. Now, not that it influences your life, your relationship, or your work. Let's not be fucking stupid. Hello, could you come into work today? Nah, I don't feel like it. It's probably not a good idea. It has been shared already at the top. Rope put it there earlier. So if you look up a little bit in the chat, the link is there. So you can actually see it there, Kalapa. I agree, Deb. Some people do, others don't. Professional, personal, it's a moving scale. It definitely is. And of course, look, England would not manage to function at all if everybody said no. If everybody went into work at 9 and left at 5 and had their very strict lunch hour, probably most of our economy would collapse. The same for most societies and worlds that we're in. We depend on people doing a little bit extra. We depend on that teacher making and going above and beyond. We depend on that police officer doing the same, or somebody else doing those things. And actually, what we then do is we're taught in a world that you have to keep giving in order for it to function. Ropes. Do I want to go to work? No. Do I want to buy food? Yes. I say yes to work in order to live in today's society. And there's a real truth in that. And then there's how much can I adapt my life in order that my yeses and nos count a little more. Being able to say no is very relative and very important when it comes to our EQ, our emotional intelligence. The higher EQ you have, the the awareness that we have as far as our emotions go means that you are generally happier. You are more content with life. You feel better about life. So I bet if I ask all of you, do you have any regrets in your life where you said no, where you shouldn't have, or you said yes, where really you should have said no? I can guarantee that you all have a fair few examples, because we've all done it. Sometimes they're really big things like, do you want another child? Sure. Or let's have a child to save our marriage. That's a good one. Let's do that. That's a wonderful idea. Fantastic. Or our relationship is utterly falling apart. I know, let's go poly. Let's do that. That will really save our relationship. Let's bring other people in. That tiny split will now become a chasm. What a wonderful idea that was. Don't get me wrong, in some circumstances it can help, but also people don't always say yes for the right reason. So our no really matters. When we learn to say no, this is a chicken and egg situation. Often our self-confidence will go up. The same as when we set boundaries, our self-confidence will go up. We feel better for it, especially when we're listened to. And actually, we can say no in very kind ways. I can't remember the woman's name. There's a wonderful woman on Instagram who shares how she deals with corporate situations. And when she'll give the example of corporate saying, hi, I need you to do this job and you've got to fit it in and you need to get on with it really quickly. And she'll say, thank you. What else would you like me to give up? Because clearly I can't manage that in my normal day, and I'm sure you don't want me to be exhausted, so I can't function to maximum capacity. She's really great at the little snippets that she gives. She's really clever. I'll find her one day and I'll put her up, because she's really clever the way she deals with people. Saying no is really important. But also what no is a big power jump. It's a fucking massive mark of self-respect. I respect myself not to do that. My answer is no. Because we often sell the word no with negativity. We shouldn't say no. It's not very nice. It's not very kind. Ropes. Oh, I know the one you're talking about. Comedy skits. Give me a minute. She has a cup that says cunt and the handle is the C. Sorry, unt, and the handle is the C. Her cup says cunt. She does. She's really funny. I really like her. But she's so good at these things. And there's also a lawyer on Instagram that does these little snippets as well. And he's really good about how to handle things. So we have put such a bad connotation about saying no out into the world, where we say, we shouldn't. You should always be saying yes. I mean, Jesus Christ, Jim Carrey did a film about it, didn't he? He said yes to everything. And of course it all works out brilliantly, because films do, but we don't live in films. That's not the way the work is, but it's not the way life is. So we do have to say no sometimes. What does it mean? If we really worry about saying no or giving good or negative feedback, so let's talk about techniques. So the one I just said, practice 3 times saying no and see what happens. That's a really good one. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, brilliant. Thank you very much. One technique is to say no to 3 things in the next 2 weeks and see what happens to you. See if your life collapses. I warn people when they come into therapy that we will be changing things in their lives. I'm pretty directive in my therapy. I'm pretty challenging in my therapy when I'm therapeutic with people, because you want change. And if you want change, that means some things have got to change. Lex, I also think about how this applies intersectionally. Women, femmes are culturally pressured to always say yes, 100%. I'm going to come on to that one as well. I also think for femmes and femme presenting persons, we're expected to always say yes. It's so interesting, both of you have said that. And it's frowned upon, or we're considered difficult when we say no, and that starts early on in life. Because we're meant to please. We're meant to be pretty little things that don't wear dungarees, that put a little dress on, say yes to that. If somebody asks for something, just sort that out. And that's still a very focused, it is a way we still treat our kids. And we're still raising that way. That hasn't changed. Back to a couple of techniques. Practice saying no on very small, minor things and see how you feel. See what comes up for you. Also see if you can manage that. Can you ride that emotional wave that says, oh, I can't. Oh God, I can, and I'm all right. It's a little bit like being on the crest of an orgasm. You're like, okay, and the drop-off's there. We're good now. We've got that. So they're just little things to think, can I manage this? Do I want to say no to this? Because it will help us. It does make a difference. We need to teach little girls to say no. Do you believe in the term oversex? I don't understand what that's got to do with anything we're actually talking about, so I'm not going to answer that. It's also in some cultures to say yes is seen as bad if you say no. I agree. So again, I'm going to come on to cultural differences as well. So practice saying no and yes at different times can really be good for you. We can also do the sandwich method, which is quite nice, saying, thank you so much for that invite to the party. I haven't found any use by saying no to my wife. I understand that's supposed to be funny, and I guess I have some discomfort with that because we just go at that classic expense of making a joke about a woman, about a wife, and we go back to that cliche that just keeps that stuff going in our own way, and I'm not sure that's always good. Not a joke. Okay, then you need to balance your relationship and have some couples therapy if that's not a joke, and maybe it's really important that no is heard as much as yes. You need to find your no. It's really important. We can sandwich a negative statement between two positive ones. So like, Poppy really didn't want to let me down tonight. 100% get her, and she's really not well though. And I really want her to be able to say, listen, Deb, I love doing these workshops. I've really hurt myself. I really can't manage it. I really am looking forward to the next one. So what she's done is put two positives around a negative. Not what she said exactly, but that's really one way to do it. Even if I say no, it'll be turned into a yes, then I would look at that if I were you in some way and look at how you feel about that. If you feel okay about it, that's fine. But this isn't personal therapy. This is about everybody. But I think we also have to find is, why do I want to say no to this? How important is this no to me? What am I doing here if I give my yes away? And actually it then costs me and I'm giving of myself. So it's a balance between society, between you, between others, between the culture that we've been brought up in. That culture really matters. It might be that women are very much taught. It might be that sex is said that you should always say yes or you should always say no. If we live in a very Christian or very society that says you should never say yes to sex, for example, that makes a real difference too. So you always have to say no, otherwise you are something. Bye. So Roy says, I find it difficult to say no because I feel the disappointment the other person feels. It might be related to compassion. I think sometimes we also assume we know what the other person feels rather than actually just testing it out. And it is okay for people to feel sad. It is okay for people to feel angry. And it is okay for people to feel disappointed. The issue here is when we are really worried about that, what we worry about is the knock-on effect, the consequence. It's not them feeling disappointed that we're actually worried about. We're worried about what that will do to our relationship with them 9 times out of 10. And that's the thing that makes the difference. So Panda, while I'm not exactly a people pleaser, I sometimes find it hard to say no when I know it will cause a negative reaction or drama. Why is the question? Drama, I understand we want to get rid of, but if we don't create a little bit of drama sometimes, then we're always going to leave ourselves in a situation where it won't work. It's like the screaming child that won't sleep. Sometimes we have to help or create a situation where a child can learn to sleep. And sometimes bringing it into our bed isn't always the best idea because it means we sleep badly for the next 20 years, potentially. I don't know how long they're staying in your bed for. Whereas if we can teach a child to sleep and still be positive, I'm not saying we should all detach from our children. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if we can get to sleep and they learn to sleep, then gosh, everyone's better off. But it did take a little bit of drama for a short period of time. I try to frame it as how much am I willing to part with? Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is, what's the cost to me here? Emotionally, physically, and then owning. I'm a really big believer, and I'm going to say this time and time again. We need to own our choices. If you say no, own your no. If you say yes, own your yes. But it's really important by saying no, we set a boundary. There is a difference between preferences and boundaries. For me, boundaries are absolute. Boundaries are, I will leave this relationship if this happens. It doesn't mean me controlling you. It means controlling my response to what's happening and how this works. So I will go. And this isn't okay by me. And that's a healthy boundary. If you say, you left the toilet, except that's a boundary for me. No, it's not. It's a preference. You're not walking out at that moment, are you? We misuse the word boundaries at the moment all the time. Ropes also said, if you always say yes or no, then you introduce a pattern and expectation. We set ourselves up, don't we, a lot to that people expect us to always do something, always have something, always know something, always be ready, always put ourselves out. And that can create a lot of pressure internally and externally. Sometimes it's not yes or no, but yes, but, and no, but, so that we give clarity beyond a single word. Example, no, I'm not comfortable with that right now, but let's talk about it again at a later time. Yes, and that is a technique. And that's what I was just saying about the sandwich as well. So I would love to do that at a different time. That is not something I can manage physically or emotionally right now. Somebody starts talking to you and really offloading or trauma dumping. I really appreciate you are in a horrible situation, and right now I am not the person who can hear that. I will be of no value. I have nothing left to give right now. I really think it's important that we find you find someone who you can talk to. There are ways of saying it. I don't always go with a but, because it means you don't mean the yes or the no in the first place, because it post a but kind of takes away what we were doing in the first place. So I really want to, that sounds lovely. There are things I can do. They're really important. They matter too. No is not selfish. It's not impolite. It's not aggressive. It is a form of looking after ourselves. And I think that's really important to be aware of. And then again, it's about the cost of it. Where am I going to put my energy in this? Not right now. There is a healthy no, and there is a warning no, and there is a no that says, no, I can't do it. It's all about our self-development, our self-love, our self-care, about how we look after ourselves. It's really important. And that's a really important thing to remember. There's a real power in saying no. However, there's also a real power in saying yes. And there's also the disempowerment of saying yes too much. The power of yes is really important. I mean, how exciting to say yes to something that's new, different, an opportunity for us to do, something we can learn from, especially in the kink world. But of course, when we start with kink, we often end up with a lot of frenzy. So we say yes to everything. We want to give everything a go. We burn the candle at both ends. Saying no, but then feeling guilty for saying no. And that's what I'm talking about, Ash, about owning your decision. So just take a minute and say, hang on, just let me think about that for a minute. And actually using filler words is okay in this sort of scenario. Good question. Just working out if I can. Again, another filler gives us a little bit of time just to take a breath to say, look, I'm really aware I might feel guilty about this, and I feel bad about it in some ways already. That's a no from me. I tell you, the hardest thing to do is just say no. You know, people say just say no about drugs and different things. Somebody says, could you help me out? Could you carry this? No. That is almost impossible to say for most people most of the time. We will always give a reason. We will always justify. Very few people say, nah. And when they do, we think, that's a bit aggressive, that was a bit rude, but it's really justified. It's okay. And if we're going to feel guilty about saying no, we have to look at our patterns. We have to look at our past. We have to look at the why and work on that. If we just sit in the guilt and we let that ferment, it just ferments into something that's really not very good for us. We end up with a very serious yeast infection. It's not so good. Don't let it ferment. I find it hard to say no to my mum, maybe due to my culture as well, for sure. So it depending on what cultures you're from. So if we go into Asian cultures, Indian cultures, and we go into religious cultures, if we go into Judaism, Muslim, Hindu, if we go into strict Catholicism, if we even go to places like Italy and other places, yeah, okay, Muslim, Asian, there is a lot of cultural pressure not to say no to your parents, that you are born in order to facilitate your parents. And then what we've got to ask as well is, how much do I want to say yes to my parent, or am I doing it culturally? Do I want to own that? Is that okay? Do you actually want to be the one who does say yes or no to your mum? A yes yeast infection, maybe, Karis. Funny. funny. So I think that's really hard, and culture really does come into it. So I've been brought up as a Jewish woman. Culturally, you don't say no to your parents. It's really important you don't say no, and you're supposed to look after your parents in so many ways, and there's a lot of pressure. It's not quite the same. Your pressure is probably a lot stronger on average, and I'm making a very assumptive phrase there. On average, I work in a lot of cultures, and I would say that that is so. It's really hard. One of my clients at the moment wants to go away with her partner. They're not married yet. They're not even engaged, and her parents would go mad would be really, that's not okay, that's not acceptable. When you're married, that's the time you can move out of home as well. You may not move out before. So we also have to realize our privilege when we have a lot of space to be able to say yes or no. That's an important thing too. 100% understand that. Yeah, of course you do. But I really get that. And it's also working with her to have a voice and actually not getting involved in all the family arguments. Sometimes being a little bit further away gives us the possibility and feasibility to say yes or no. And not to actually use the word no makes a difference as well. That's something I can look at in a while. I definitely will. I'll let you know. It's a no, but it's not really a no. I think it's really good to be clear, and sometimes, especially in cultural and religious and familial circumstances, we cannot be that direct. We would hurt people, and they're also part of that culture as well. Like your mum's upbringing absolutely made her who she was. I think the younger we are, the more we are starting to understand different choices, and we're getting much better at psychology, and we're getting much better at awareness. I'm going to Egypt next week, and if I tell people locally what I do, they say, how do you survive on that? Surely no one comes to see you. It's a comment I get all the time. And I say, no, completely. And then people start talking to me and they say, I wouldn't go and see someone here. That's just not okay. That doesn't happen. So again, culturally, not going to share, not going to do that sort of stuff. So the power of yes. So you've got to be careful, because yes is really important. It can provide us with confidence, again, like no can. It can be really relative. I'm up for that. I'll do that project. But again, you've got to watch out that when you say yes, that you're starting to say no to yourself. If you overuse the word yes, you're saying no to yourself. And that's really important. Everything has its negatives, be it a yes or a no. And it's really important that we understand that. It's not a healthy impulse. There were some really interesting pieces of research in 2017. Don't ask me what they were. I can't remember off the top of my head, and I apologize for that. But people who really struggle to say no are likely to be more anxious and feel less in control of their lives. So again, really important. Finding no is really important. And there is a line between healthy and unhealthy when we use those words, yes or no. But it's also about our past and our history. If you think about how you were brought up, about who you could say yes or no to, what was it like for you? What's the culture around yes? If you had to write a few paragraphs or phrases, what's the culture around no? What would they mean? What would the consequences be? And how much am I still influenced by that? Was that my peers? Was it school? Was it groups that I was part of? Is it my life? Is it my parents? Do my parents expect me to say yes or no? If so, we're quite likely to fall into that people-pleasing space. That also means sometimes in other parts of our lives, we can be quite cross about that and say no to too many things or yes to too many things because we don't want to do it here. So again, our culture really has to come into this, because you have to live in your family. Unless you choose to walk away or divorce, we also again have to own our own awareness of this is where I want to go and this is what I want to do. At what point does saying no within a cultural decision making process become coercion? All too often. At some point in every culture, there are changes, and at some point in every culture, there are comparisons. There are definite comparisons. Let's take LGBTQI. Still, in too many countries, to be queer is illegal. And you can die from it. You can actually be executed for it in some countries. Whereas other countries have already gone through that fight, and it often takes somebody to start making those decisions, somebody to start standing up for things. God, and so in my day, if I think about LGBTQI, I was born in 1965. I'm an old woman. So I was born in 1965. The marches I went on, the Pride marches, were different to Pride marches now. They were statements, they were political statements, they were fighting for people's rights. We are still fighting for those rights. If you, and actually sometimes there was a risk to your life. People die for causes, don't they? They were definitely quite dangerous. They were not drugs and glitter, which a lot of Pride marches are now. However, if you then go and do a Pride march in a different culture, you are putting your life at risk. So cultures are different at different times. So there is definite coercion culturally, happens all the time. Saying no and getting disowned because you're standing up for yourself, again, that's a huge cost, isn't it? And that would be a massive difference. And that's maybe not something we can always do. Hi, Simon. I hope you put Poppy to bed. He did. Simon is with Poppy. Poppy, like, she's in bed. That's a good thing. So it's really important that this is ironic because this is all about saying yes and no. And that woman needs to learn that. So it's really important. Been there, not fun. And you have to understand that sometimes the decisions we make have huge implications, huge costs. That's why yes and no for me are sliding doors. I think we have to watch this sexually as well and or lifestylishly. Submissive people will often say yes more than they mean it. Would you say that's true as a submissive person if you are, or have you noticed that in submissive people around you? They have more of a tendency to want to please, more of a tendency to fawn. And when people come on the scene, first of all, yes, they tend to do that a little bit too much. And there's so much that flies around about how people should be on the scene. Not just in life, let's just talk about the scene and polyamory here. This is what you should be doing. You're new, you don't know. Every submissive I know does it this way, and there's definite coercion and manipulation from people. And we do need to say yes, but too much of a level of acquiescence and submissiveness is really dangerous for their own safety and different things that they do. I'm more submissive in my social life, and yes, that statement is definitely true. And Roy says, yes, definitely. And Elle says, absolutely. And there's the fear that if they say no, they won't get what they crave at all, or the other person will leave. I think what we've always got to look at is our fear is fundamentally about, if I say no, I am not the human doing that I should be, therefore I will be abandoned. That's at the core of most people's no's. And the fear of no's. That's the core. If I say no, there's a difference between being a human being and a human doing. And you've probably heard me say that before and heard many thousands of other people say it as well. If I get accepted because of the human doing I bring to the world, then I'm okay. Cosmopolite, I don't know if that's true for submissives, but I think it might be true for submissive personality types. For sure. And also, for me personally, as a therapist who specializes in this, and I've got, I don't know how many hours I've got now, actually. I stopped counting at 50,000. I can tell you it's pretty true. Have I done the research? No, I can still tell you overall it's pretty true. Could you argue that submissive personality types are in the scene and out of the scene? Yeah, they're both present there. We're all very frightened sometimes. So really what it is about abandonment. If I am not the person you want me to be, and that includes my yes or no, then you might leave me and I might not get what I want or need. So we exhaust ourselves with saying yes instead. The problem is boundaries are really hard. I think it's partially a natural tendency and partly a result of getting a negative reaction from previous DOMs. Might be. A lot of people don't have previous DOMs and come in and actually really find their home and their life. And when we're in new submissive, like a lot of people will swoop in on us. We you'll find a group of people that will definitely go for new people a lot of the time and tell them that no isn't an option because you're submissive. If you were a true submissive, you wouldn't say no. If you loved me, you wouldn't say no. There's a nice coercive one. And all of these things are really manipulative and quite strong. So it's quite difficult, isn't it? It makes a difference. The thing is, we have to realize if we do hold a boundary and we do start to say no, it isn't a crime. The right people won't hate you. The right people won't leave you. The right people will love you and appreciate it. But please hear what I just said, the right people. How does this yes, no tie into attachment styles? I'm disorganized attachment style, and even I lose track of my yeses and nos and what I'm looking for, I bet. It completely ties into attachment styles. So if you have an insecure or an avoidant or even a dismissive attachment style, at times, they come from some form of trauma with a small t, not necessarily with a big capital T. They are, I don't quite know how I fit in the world. And I really like the fact that you've used the word attachment style rather than attachment condition, issue, or anything else as well, because they're very different. An attachment disorder is pretty rare. However, we all have attachment styles. I have a writing all about attachment and attachment patterns. And in one of the last workshops that we did on attachment styles and patterns, I also covered how not just attachment styles happen in relationships, but how they happen in breakups too, and how they impact relationships. I had a friend who was trained by her dom to not say no. When she left him, she still finds it hard. I meet a lot of people who can't even orgasm, can't brush their own hair, can't manage a lot of things by themselves because they've been so conditioned. However, that conditioning will go. It'll speed up a little bit with therapy. It won't cure it. It will just make it a little bit faster. When we talk about rescuing people from cults, and the influence that has and how we have to put them into therapy. The therapy doesn't cure the person, it just speeds up the process because that conditioning needs undoing. So attachment styles are very, very based, will influence our yeses and nos, because if I'm anxious or insecure and I use the word no, I'm really going to worry about what that means, because you might not like me anymore. I'm so scared of whether you're attached to me. I don't think you are. So I don't think you are, and I don't know what to do. So if I just say yes, it will all be okay. And actually it won't, because long term it actually makes things worse. So our attachment styles are utterly related to our yeses and our nos and how we use them. Master Jim. So if you're not prepared to say no, then you're not ready to say yes. No is a complete sentence. And as I said earlier, a lot of people really struggle with just saying no. That's why I say in that exercise, when you pick 3 things to say no to for the next week or 2, and see what happens, see if you die, see if something awful happens, see if somebody gets angry with you, see if somebody criticizes you, see if somebody hates you, leaves you, see if you can live with the guilt, whether you'll manage your way through it, whether you are loved or not loved. Actually, you'll find out you'll probably be okay. But I did say the right people, because what happens is often if we are a people pleaser or we use a lot of yeses or nos, we attract a certain type of person around us. And often that person can take advantage of those yeses and nos. Whether they mean to or not can often be very, very subconsciously. And then when we start to change, if you think of a Fisher-Price shape sorting box, families are systems. So systemic therapy is also really important here. Families are systems, so are couples. We are a system. You have your shape, I have mine. You might be a sphere, so you go in the circle. I might be a cube, so I go in the square. And those shapes fit in the right one. And it doesn't matter how much we take a hammer and try and bang it in, but the problem is we change our shape. And in therapy, it changes our shape. In relationships, we change our shape. And it's really frustrating. We're like bang, 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 and it's really hard. Ash says, I'm marrying my partner next Monday. I won't say no to him. Just in that moment, maybe. I mean, afterwards or later, maybe. I don't know about your relationship. But no, I hope you won't say no in that moment. But I also hope you would say no if it wasn't right for you. There's an awful lot of social coercion at that altar. If you decide to get married and you say no there, most people will say to you, oh, don't do that. Fucking hell, don't do that. So there's an awful lot of pressure if we want to go somewhere else. Does neurodiversity influence our ease when it comes to saying yes or no? I had a few neurotypical friends tell me that they learned to say no because they've seen me say no to things quite often, but to me saying those no's wasn't a big deal. Yes, it makes a huge difference. Now, it also depends on your neurodiversity, because many things come under neurodiverse. When we are autistic or on the autism spectrum, for example, a lot of people find it easier to say no because actually that's what they want to do, and they haven't learned the social niceties or norms of having to do what somebody else says they should or shouldn't. And the algorithm is more no based than it is yes, and then we learn to change that and work with it. So it also depends on our neurodiversity. Somebody with ADHD, if it's something that turns their mind on, I very like to say, yeah, I'll do it, and actually really regret it because it's the 53rd thing that they've said yes to that day, and they're still only on the 3rd, and they're probably not going to get it done. And I have ADHD, so let's not criticize. It's, I'll do it. Oh my God, that's one of my things. Like, yeah, I can do it. I'll do it. I'm the one. Yeah, I'm the one you need. However, also people who, different forms of neurodiversity have learned different things from their families. So what you will also find sometimes that if somebody who is neurodiverse hasn't learnt boundaries because their families have said things like, you can't help it, you've got this, I'll say yes to everything, that child doesn't know how to hear a no or accept a no or understand a boundary. So it's really important, even if our children are neurodiverse, that they understand consequence, but often they're not taught that. And then we get into more extreme things like rejection sensitivity dysphoria. If we have emotionally unstable personality disorder that used to be called borderline, yes and no's are very complex and very hard because it's a push me, pull me system. And it's really complex. And we're so scared about being rejected that we'll say yes to everything. RSD isn't a recognized trait. It's just something that you find a lot of people with ADHD have in common. And therefore, the likelihood to say yes goes up massively. 5 new messages. Sorry, right. So Anna says, oh, there you go. Rejection dysphoria is real. So no is hard to say. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD, is a really big thing. And that's so interesting. Elle says, I'm both autistic and ADHD. And they will both have had different influences on you. On also, though, compared to your upbringing. So your upbringing will influence your neurodiversity as well as your neurodiversities. It's that whole thing of genetics and culture. Oh yeah, ADHD, I'm terrible at that, says Karis. Counter to this, as an autistic person, it can be hard to say no because I've been conditioned to think of what the other person might want. And that's exactly my point just there, Simon, because of that conditioning of like, no, I'm quite belligerent, I want to say, no, you mustn't do that. So your algorithm has been pushed into, if I don't say yes, I'm not okay. And if I don't say yes, people won't accept me. I have one autistic client, and I'm describing as that because it's really important here. Their autism is a complete separate from me. I don't even see it. But I love some of the things they bring to me. I want to do this. Do you think I should? No, you really shouldn't do that. Oh, okay. Is that not what people do? No, don't do that. And I'm talking about quite extreme things, things along the lines of, so when they walk past me in those yoga pants, I just want to do this all the way as to where, no, don't do that. That's not a good thing to do. But why not? I really like their bum. Why can't I look at their bum and tell them their bum looks amazing? Because you can't. But we have to learn why. Or, I'm sharing a room or I pick this up in the washing. Is it wrong if I pick up then? Yes, it is. But it's wrong according to the society and the culture that we live in. And I love the way he asks me these questions because he's such an awesome human being. So I have ADHD and maybe on the spectrum, and it's almost like my brain feeds off pleasing people, even if I didn't know I don't want to. So if we go about feeding, especially with ADHD, not so much autism, but more ADHD, if we are ADHD, we live off dopamine. We're always looking for dopamine. So if we get things achieved and done and we feel good about that, and so like, I never understand why ADHD is called ADHD because it's not about attention deficit. If you find the right thing, you can fucking be hyper-focused for the next 12 years or 3 minutes or 4 months and be completely into it and go, yes, I'm having this dopamining. We're always looking, we're always mining that dopamine and trying to get it. Completely, I agree. It should be attention regulation disorder. So what you find is if people say yes to us, that's a dopamine hit. If we please people, it's a dopamine hit. We're like, oh, okay, yay, love that, thank you very much. So again, that makes a difference to our brains when we hear a yes or we say a yes, and that's what we hope we get. So again, it's about really learning, hang on, and this is again a really important technique, at what cost? So one of the things I always taught my kids was future me, and a can of Coke comes into this one massively with one of my daughters, Kaylin. So I've always taught my kids to do this, but this is a really difficult thing to do. We do not understand the consequence to us in the future properly. We just don't. You are not designed to do that. We are very much cued and brainwired to work on immediacy. And that immediacy is, I want a can of Coke, I'll have a can of Coke, but I have to think of what will this Coke cost me? It's a lot of sugar. Is that diabetes? Is that obesity? Is that thrush in a can? Is it many things waiting to happen? Is it tooth rot? It's many things. But the reason it makes me think of my daughter Kaylin is I've spoken to a lot to my kids about doing that. And often what she used to say when she was little is she would go to the fridge and she would get a can of Coca-Cola out. She went, future me is very happy with past me. Well done, me. Because she put it in the fridge and it was nice and cold. So that was a good consequence for her. And it is something to think about. What will this cost me? Ash, I'm a people pleaser. I find it hard to say no. I can't see people unhappy. Yes, you can. That can't is the problem. I can't. No, at the moment you might not know how. You don't want to. It's unusual for you and it's uncomfortable. It's not an I can't. That's the stuckness of the pattern. It's something you're not used to because you believe that if I do this, this will happen and therefore I won't be okay. So let's play a game. Because what we do in that moment, Ash, is we predict the future. How many people predict the future here? It won't go well. I won't be happy. It won't be all right. Yeah, quite a few of you. Right, okay. Now, look, no one has to answer this, right? So we talk about dopamining. Oh, do you not know that one, Karis? It's such a good term. Honestly, have you not heard of it? That sounds really facetious. I'm so sorry. I don't mean it that way. I'm so sorry you haven't heard of that. It's such a good phrase. We are forever mining for dopamining, especially if you have ADHD. So, let's ADHD Love on Instagram can't take credit. Yeah, I love ADHD Love. I love them as a couple, and they have a book out called Dirty Laundry, and they're also doing a talk soon in London if you like them, and all round the UK if you want to go and see them. They are wonderful human beings and very, very funny. I think dopamine hit might explain why I enjoy saying yes to most things, whatever I'm asked. It's a really good thing to realise. So I can't even remember what I was saying now. So you have to leave. Meet you all next time. Thanks. Bye. So when we are saying yes, we have to think about how much we predict the future. Got it. You see, it can work for me, my brain sometimes. So what I want you all to think about in your heads right now is how much money do you have in an account? Pick your current account and your savings account and add them together. And I don't care if it's a fiver. I don't care if it's £5,000, £500 or £50,000 or 5 million. I want to take every single bit of cash that you have got. So today is Thursday. Tomorrow in the UK, we have and I've said this technique to people before, we have the lottery tomorrow. So I want you to take every single penny that you have right now, whether it's £5 that's got to last till Sunday, or whether it's 500 to 5 million, and I want you to spend it on the lottery tonight. Please don't do that, any of you, for fuck's sake. No one blame me for doing that, okay? I'm not taking that. Would you do that? Would you put every single penny you have on the lottery? No. Why not? No. Nope. No, thank you. I've got a daughter called Erin. No. Nah. So most of you are saying no. Why wouldn't you? I can't predict the future. Thank you very much, Cosmopolite. It's interesting though, isn't it? But our brains, fuck no, risk reward is way off. But isn't it interesting? When something is negative, you can predict the future and you believe it 100%. Well, this won't go well. This won't happen. Well, fuck me. And what I say to myself every time I say that to myself is lottery, Deb. Okay, I can't predict the future. I don't know. My pattern is off. My pattern is a maybe. But actually, if I wouldn't spend my £5 on the lottery, why am I predicting a negative future? It's really interesting. Okay, done. Thanks a lot, Jim. My disaster crystal ball of doom is 100% accurate, don't you know? 110, even though that doesn't exist. There you go. See, you're predicting a future that can't even be. But it's not, is it? If you truly question every time you predicted a negative outcome, have you always been 100% accurate? I guarantee that's not. I guarantee it. We have a negative bias, but we have a negative bias because your brain is hardwired to survive. So in order to survive, we need to see negativity. However, that's from a very old part of our brain, the limbic system. And it's from many, 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 many times, thousands of years ago, whereby actually, you know, I really understand we weren't around at the time of dinosaurs. I said this before, but if a fucking great big dinosaur comes towards you, we have to think about that. Oh, risk averse. That's a really good question. In 2 weeks' time, or I think it's maybe 3 or 4 actually, I'm doing risk. So we're absolutely covering a whole workshop on risk, adversity, where we get it from, what it means. So we're doing a whole workshop on risk in 4 weeks. So I won't go into that massively now. But we naturally will look for something that will keep us alive. So in order to have that knowledge, we gain that by looking at what hurts us and what doesn't hurt us and what that means. But we mainly learn from what hurts us. So we look for negativity. Oh my God, as a project manager, I have strong feelings about formal risk management. Bring them in 4 weeks. Tell your missus, give them to her and write out the workshop. Not sure this will be helpful, but to fellow autistics, when you're struggling to say no, think if you're being fair to yourself or not. As we usually have a strong sense of justice, maybe realizing you're being unfair to yourself could help you say no and not feel as bad. Don't put a question mark by that. That's a really good one. And that's what I'm saying about how much is it costing me? But as you say, using the word fair around autism is a much better in. It makes a real difference. Is this justifiable? Can I justice? And then again, I'm going to use a couple of questions that I've bastardized from somebody else. Katie's questions. Okay, I'm about to do this. Is it helpful to me? Is this what I want to do? Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Hang on. Is it really what you want to do? So the first question is this good? Is it bad? Is this right for you? Is this what you want to do? Yes, it is. It's a very subjective yes. But then the second time you ask it, I'm after an objective answer. Could you prove it? Could you prove it in a court of law? Could you prove it in a lab? Could you prove it somewhere else? And your answer will often be, no. It's never a normal no. It's always a no that's a bit like, and then you've got to ask, okay, so why am I doing this if I can't prove it? If I want to, and I'm pretty sure I've thought about that, that's okay, still do it, as long as you own the decision. But is it true? Yes. Is it true? Maybe not. What do you get out of doing the first one? Is it a dopamine hit? Does it feed you? Does it satiate a need in you? Does it placate the other person? Does it help you in that yes or that no moment? In the military, they constantly tell you to have PMA, positive mental attitude. Yeah. Is it a positive mental attitude to run towards a bomb or fucking stupidity? I don't know. I think it depends on the situation. I think you have to have a realistic approach mixed with being able to weigh up all the facts and the consequences. But in the military, they don't want you to weigh up all the consequences, because if you do that, you wouldn't be in the military, depending on where you're going. If you're thinking about just you're stationed in the UK, you've got a good job ahead of you, but going to war is never going to be something that is risk averse or different or aware. A lot of military conditioning is training and conditioning to make sure. We do risk management from the time you awake to the time you go to sleep. And yet we rarely do it. So we talk about risk management. We're going on to the next workshops. I'm going to bring it back. We rarely do it in our yeses and nos, because the risk we take into account isn't about what's good for us. It's about what we're used to. And that's the problem with that risk awareness in that moment. It's not really about a greater, bigger, better, gooder risk. There's no such word as gooder. It's all about, what risk am I willing to take in order to keep me in my box? Because my box is where I belong, my box is where I feel comfortable, therefore that's all I'm going to do. So you end up saying yes or no according to the rules of your box. Yes, the P's in the military, proper planning prevents piss poor performance. I think planning can help. However, again, with risk, if your planning is based on a set of principles that are a little bit sand quickie and not so good, you've got to think about that, because our yeses and nos are often based on what we're used to, what that looks like, and what it means to us. So we have to be really aware. If you think about when people are born, when they're born, we're like tree rings. So we have epigenetics and genetics that influence us, and they might make quite a few rings for us. We have in utero experience and parental expectations and psychology before we're even born. We have the actual birth experience, and this just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And sometimes some of our tree rings, we're not linear, we don't leave it behind. That young experience is part of us. So we're this big tree that we need to learn to take care of. And some of our lines are too rigid and boundaried because of that's what we've been taught. And some of our lines are too opaque or allow fluid or different things through them in the wrong way. They're not strong where they should be strong because of our experiences. And that influences how we say yes or no. It influences how we're even going to negotiate. If you want to start to negotiate over a scene, you've got to know what you fucking want in the first place. Otherwise, your negotiation is a no-go. And it's really dangerous. So no's are really important. When we look at boundaries, we often say yes when we mean no. Love this, thank you. Is that for Simon's piss poor planning prevents, or proper planning prevents, or love the words? I don't know which one you meant. Simon's is a good one. Ropes, regarding boxes, there's a writing I think you'd like on that new site we'd spoken about before. This is my box, this is your box. Sometimes I visit your box, sometimes others. Sometimes I stay in mine, but I always return to my box. I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, and there's a really interesting joke. There's a comedy skit about, this is very gender-based, and I'm going to go with it for a moment. bear with me, that a lot of men's brains are quite boxed. This is the section, this is how it works. I'm going to go into this box and I'm going to that box. And then a lot of women's brains, this isn't 100% true, is it? Clearly, is a lot more about wires and wool and different things moving around, because everything's connected about the consequence. Because I think we're all probably born with quite boxed brains, but with a conditioning that some of us get. Now, it's not all women, it's not all men, it's not all non-binary, it's just some people some of the time. And a lot of them happen to be women or girls because that's what society dictates is so. If you're told that you can't have the box and you have to think about it this way, you have to connect it all. Boxes start to crush from quite a young age. So it's really hard to stay or keep people separate or work that out, because you just have to make it work for everybody. Cats love boxes, they feel safe. Do we fit ourselves into boxes? But actually, children love boxes. Do you know, I was killing myself in this last month getting my daughter's new business open, because they're in America and Sweden working. And 2 lads fucking killed themselves. I'm next on the list, definitely near enough killed myself. And then 2 others helped out and did quite a lot as well. And what's interesting, one of the lads brought their lads, because that's how they describe themselves, brought his daughter, the much younger one, Gia, who's just this beautiful human being and loves my daughter, Brian. She's my best friend. No, she's my daughter. No, she's my sister. She's really cute and funny. We've got all this stuff here, including this giant soft play with all these new toys. And what's she in? The fucking box. Of course she is. Much more exciting. Buy a toddler a giant toy in a box, they'll ignore the toy and play with the box, which is exactly what I've just said. Let's go back to our yeses and no's. That love of boxes isn't limited to toddlers. I love an Amazon box. Does that count? Every time they come through my door, they make me happy. Oh no, wait a minute, that's my dopamining. Right, so when you want to do something, you immediately agree, and that's quite difficult. Actually, that can feel really uncomfortable. We do want to change our mind. We feel bad about it, and we feel that we can't. A yes needs to be in line with our values, with our morals, and our ethics. That makes a real difference. But what does it mean? Look, there are some basic rules that some of us can follow in life. Don't do something you wouldn't want done to you, or accept something if somebody is okay about giving it. It's really important to say yes to something else that somebody gives. If you're a person who sees your word as very important, but you have to keep breaking it, then you're starting to go against your own values, your own ethics and your morals, and that's not good for us. If we are a bit of a savior, a white knight, a caregiver, a rescuer, we start to talk about the drama triangle. So if you haven't heard of the drama triangle, it's a transactional analysis model that talks about when somebody is in a childlike position and not very adult or present. And the drama triangle has 3 spaces on it. And I've got a writing on that. It's where we either rescue, we persecute, or we're a victim. Now, a lot of people can get in a very victim status with their yeses and nos. I have to say yes. What else? What else do you want me to do? I haven't got any choice. Well, I had to say no. I can't do anything else, can I? No personal awareness or empowerment at all. A rescuer. Yeah, but I have to help. It's part of my position. I of course I'm going to say yes. Of course I'm going to say no. And the persecutor, fuck's sake. Everyone's like, you say yes to them, but you don't say yes to me, or you say no to them, but you don't. And we get stuck in some of these positions as very much a life script sometimes. And we can skate around all 3. Makes a difference. But over time, if you're in a long-term relationship, surely you'll understand each other's needs better. I see an awful lot of couples, thruples, and people who've been together for a very long time. And some people who can really communicate their own needs and haven't gone against their own values, morals, and ethics in life. Oh, thank you, Ropes. That's really kind of you. Can manage that. Some cannot. Some people go against their morals, ethics, and values for years, and then only start to understand themselves, realize that they've been lying to themselves. Some people do understand each other better, but then they actually realize that's not what they want. And that's not how they want to be with somebody. And a lot of relationships break up and we do grow apart. Relationships, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, doesn't matter. It's like a good shit. When we have peristalsis in the bowel, it moves perfectly. It makes this lovely pattern where we come back together. All the shit is worked out. All the shit is pushed out. And we feel good about that. And as soon as we start to grow apart, this starts to go horribly wrong. And all the shit really builds up and it's really bad for us and it starts to leak into us. So it's all about really being in sync with somebody, agreeing on how you disagree, Having healthy disagreements is really good. Saying yes to your partner all the time is not good. Saying no to your partner all the time is not good. What do you want really comes into this. It makes a difference. So you've got to be careful. And I still think a lot of people's yeses are based on, if I don't say yes, I'll be rejected or abandoned. And that's really something we've got to think about. Also, if I do say no and there's a fight about it, everything will blow up. It's not worth it. I might as well agree. It's much easier. How many times have we said that? Especially in a relationship. Jerry's putting his hands up like 10, 20, 5 million times. It's just easier, isn't it? But it's not, because long term, it will absolutely negatively sort out your income. Sort out your whole life, your relationship. Income, what the fuck am I talking about? And I think it's really interesting that we have to turn around and say, sometimes when somebody isn't satisfied with something or isn't okay with something, I think Roxane Gay, who is the author of The Bad Feminist, she said this in a line once, and I really do like it. When people turn around and say, but you need to do this, you've got to say yes, you've got to say no. It isn't my job to satisfy you. My job is to be me and to be here. Amazing book, by the way. Yeah, for sure. 100% recommend. Me too. So it's a really good principle that it isn't my job to satisfy you. When you come together as a couple, a throuple, whether you're poly, whether you've got a DS dynamic, whether you've got an authority transference, what's interesting is some of those can be a shift in power. To negotiate, we need an equality in power, because our yeses and nos mustn't influence too much. They're a discussion point about what are we going to do? What does that mean? And off to Amazon I go, dopamining. Oh, that's mine. Great book. It's upstairs in Erin's room. I did tell you can take a shit ton of books the other day. Ash says, setting some time aside and seeing if you're still on the same path. As humans, we all change over time. I really like when couples come to me, or throuples. When I say couples, I mean everybody. When somebody more than one comes to me, even actually if a single person comes to me, and they have therapy weekly for 50 minutes, which is 1% of your waking time on average as a human being. I'm not saying it's cheap either. You come and see someone like me, and then we fix your relationship, or we fix you, whatever the fuck that means. It's an interesting one. We cope a little better in life. We're feeling better about each other and things are better. Isn't it interesting? You've really worked hard on your relationship for those months, let's say. And then sometimes people come back to me like a year or two later. But one of the things I recommend is, if you had that 50 minutes with me, I now want you to have that 15 minutes with each other every week. The same time that you invested in yourselves, invest it back in yourselves and have conversations. Radar meetings are often had by polyamorous people, where we review and we have a look at what's happened and what that means and how it's influenced all of us. You have regular meetings and you have reviews at work, probably every 6 months or at least every year. Why aren't you having them in one of the most important things in your relationships? Even with your kids, like, where are we? What does that mean? So we need check-ins. Right, so weekly check-in can do wonders. There's a podcast that I learned about it from, To Be Better, on YouTube. I don't agree with everything they say, but they have some great tools for relationships. So check-ins are really important, but you need a good criteria for your check-ins. Like, it can't just be a blah. It can't be just having a go, and it has to be owning of where you are. And rather than saying you made me or you've got to do this, when you I feel I want is a great technique. When you did this, I felt like that. I own my feelings. I don't want to feel like that. Could we come to some working arrangement between us in order to make that different or better? When you I feel I want. Really simple technique rather than saying you made me feel this, you made me feel that. This is where it is and I don't like that. So when you I feel I want. Non-violent communication is another great tool to help with that, and that's a really good book as well. Non-violent communication says something very similar to that. It's a good book. So let's look at people pleasing. People pleasing isn't something that people are born with. You might be genetically more likely to people please than somebody else, depending on your generations before, for different reasons. That absolutely might come into why you are more of a people pleaser. However, it is the environment that you are brought into that makes the biggest difference. When we have some form of trauma, that can be with a small t or a capital T, it can be small ongoing things that make a difference. Or it can be that maybe people take up space in our lives by arguing a lot, by being very angry, and all of a sudden these people take up all this space and there's not a lot of space left for us with this little bit in the middle here. And then in order to hold that space, we just better be nice. Never go to bed unhappy, Ash says, talk, talk, talk. Now that's an interesting one. That's one I'll disagree with. You don't have to talk everything out. What you have to agree is that one of the things I love, another technique, if you're about to have an argument or you want to say something bad to your partner, is start it with, we are safe. It's a great thing to say. Our relationship is safe, and I would like to talk about this. If you have a neurodivergent partner, or you have a partner with what used to be borderline, emotionally unstable personality disorder, or you have somebody that has rejection sensitivity dysphoria, start your discussion point with, we are safe, our relationship is good, and I would like to sort out this aspect of it. I would like to make it better for both of us and for me in this moment. It's a wonderful tool and technique that really helps people who fall into that category of feeling really scared, because if all they hear is, oh my God, you want to sort something out and you might be leaving me, they're not actually listening to you anymore. Yeah, so that's what I was just saying. If you use the radar technique from Multi-Amory or from other places as well, it's a very simple technique. It's basically like setting up a meeting. If you have anything like, what's the agenda? What's the review from last time? Can I also say, if you are going to use a radar technique, like Sapandra is saying with that reference there, when you say that these things need doing, be a little bit smarter about these things. By whom, by when? What's it going to happen? Who is going to do that? And whose responsibility is that? And what will it look like when it's done? So have an awareness of what you're agreeing to do. Simon, safety and fear due to perceived lack of safety is what I struggle with in disagreements and confrontations with people. Another tool and technique I would use is, again, I would ask my partner to say, can you tell us whether we're safe or not before each argument? And I would like to say, when we're arguing sometimes, or we're disagreeing about something, I would like to share with you that my paranoid fantasy right now is, I don't want to take away from the discussion. I don't want to take away from the disagreement. And my fantasy right now is going here. Please, can we hold that in mind to come back to it? And please, can you talk bearing that in mind? Now, Brené Brown calls it the story that you tell yourself. I call it the paranoid fantasy because it's never good. It's never just a story. It's pretty paranoid and it's often fairly negative. So when we have that perceived lack of safety, again, I would go back to those Katie Byron questions. Well, is that true? Yeah, fucking well is. It is. Is it true? No, I don't think so. Maybe not. No, I'm really aware that it is my fear talking to me right now. I'm really aware that I'm predicting the future. Fuck, lottery. Let's put the lottery back in. Oh, fuck, I don't know. Okay, so let's go with it and see. Let's take a little bit of a risk. You are a risk taker to a certain extent. You wouldn't have got married. You wouldn't have had the situation that you're in if you didn't. So again, it's just testing that. Because 9 out of 10 times, actually the perceived fear or the lack of safety is going to get in the way more than what's actually happening. So perceived fear can hurt us more, and that's a really good thing to hold in mind. The perceived fear that I'm putting in the way here is hurting the other person, it's hurting me, and it's stopping our communication. That's got to be worse for me if I think about that logically. Now what? Go with it. So people pleasing is often due to environment rather than we're born this way. We might have a tendency to be more that way. We are hardwired to protect ourselves in different ways. Now, when you talk about trauma, what we talk about is fight, flight, freeze that people know often, but often people forget or don't know about. So we've got fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, flop, foe, and fawn. Fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, flop, foe, and fawn. Often people will fuck. Got to think about this when it comes to consent. They will say yes because they think they're protecting themselves. I remember being, as a 15-year-old girl, underneath a 19-year-old man, and my friend was in the other bed. We'd gone to this party thinking we were so big and so grown up. And I remember wearing my very fantastic purple and pink outfit, thought I was it. Loved it. Thought it was so grown up, invited to Tracy's party. Now I'm going, it's going to be so good. So I went with my friend. And it was really interesting because all of a sudden I found myself in a bedroom with a person who's an adult. They probably think I'm an adult. I'm not. I'm fucking 15. And I remember I remember some sexual activity taking place thinking, shit, I don't want this. This isn't going, and luckily Tracy, who's a little bit of a hero, walked in and says, fucking get off those girls. They're girls. Like, they're kids. They're like, fucking hell, we didn't know. Like, but actually I froze quite a lot in that moment. I felt like I couldn't find my voice. And actually what I did also think was, oh, if this is going to happen, I'm just going to go along with it because it's safer, because I don't know what's going to happen to me. So we can fuck. So consent, it's not coercive there, but we have coerced ourselves into it because we think that's the right way in order to stay safe. That's not good consent. Fawning is a really big one, and fawning is really important. I have a shared writing that I shared from a long time ago about fawning. It's a wonderful piece of writing. It is not mine. It is purely about fawning and submitting even as a trauma response. And it's really important to remember that we do that sometimes. So if in our lives we have maybe had some violence, or emotionally unavailable parent, or somebody hasn't been around for us when we needed them, or they weren't there, or that the family had multiple conflicts or avoided conflicts entirely, there was no balance, or maybe they had really bad mental and physical health issues themselves, which took up a lot of their time, or maybe they were addicted to something, or they weren't around, or maybe we're part of a culture or a group of people that gets a lot of racism, discrimination, microaggressions, exclusion of some kind, whether, you know, it might be based on our gender, it might be based on our color, it might be based on our age, our size, everything. The most hated kid in the playground is the fat white boy. And of course, there are many other people that have a big influence, but we seem to instinctively go for that little boy who is fat, interestingly, which is horrific. He's very, very, very bullied. And so that comes into it. So it can be about size, it can be about all sorts of different things. If those things are in our lives, they create an environment that makes a child very unable to say no, because if we do, or we're different, it's scary and we're less likely to be safe. So it's really hard to say no. So we end up people pleasing a lot in order to keep ourselves safer so that we're okay. And that's really important to understand, that people pleasing is often from a situation in a family growing up, and then we get a little bit of praise in school, we get a little bit of praise out of school or something. Oh my God, they really like me because I did something for them. And that matters too. And is flailing, we could say flailing, fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, flop, flow, fawn, flail. That could probably go in there. You never know, it could go in there, like Kermit needs to be in there too. So that could be in there. Deb's writing on fawning. Oh, thank you very much. It's not my writing, please. I absolutely state it's not my writing, and I put the link into the original author and tell you all about it and all about them, because they are an amazing human for what they've written. It's really, really, really good. We have to understand that systemically as well, if we've got that Fisher-Price box where we're not the right shape, is that we have fitted all of our lives into the shape that our family gave us, created, and we had very little influence over. And as we grow up and grow and change, actually we might want to change our shape. That's something to say yes to. But if you do, you don't fit in your family's shape anymore. And that's something we don't feel comfortable with saying yes to, because it feels like it's too much, because it doesn't stick with the values and our authenticity that we've been taught. Authenticity is a really important word to me. It's written on my finger in Hebrew. And it is an important word to me. It's one I use a lot. And I've written about that before. Who am I? What are my values? What are my morals? What are my ethics? Who am I in order to understand myself? If I pretend to be somebody else in order to be loved, in order to be cared for, in order to be accepted, in order to be chosen, how long can I keep that up? And actually, if I keep that masking up, and we talk about neurodivergence, we talk about masking a lot. If I am who you think I should be, that's exhausting to keep up. Now, is some masking necessary in life? A little bit sometimes, of course it fucking is. You cannot go to the bottom of the garden and prune your roses and turn round when Mrs. Smith next door says, hello, darling, did you have a nice night? I'm a bit sore, actually. I've got fisted up my arse and I've got a couple of fissures. I think I should go to the doctor about it. Probably not appropriate. Probably oversharing. Probably doesn't need to hear about it. That bit, just cut it off a little bit and say, I'm a little bit tired, had a bit of a rough night. How are you? We don't need to share everything. We have to think about it. It's like in some cultures, we expect to look after our parents into old age. We are seen as bad if we don't. Oh, 100%. Your children are born just to look after their parents. That's the way it used to be. And in some cultures and in some religions, even more so. That is your job. That is what you will do. We can choose to move countries, to change things. That does make a little bit of a difference. Although some people will then say, no, I need to make an awful lot of money to do that, to make sure I can look after my parents. And it's a huge issue because people will fawn and say, that's what I've got to do. So I would really suggest that you read that Writing Over Fawning, especially if you've been brought up traumatically. However, your ethics, your authenticity, yourself, if we ask, who am I? What is it that I want? We then have to learn that balance, especially in our culture with a small c and a capital C, about how much can I have that I want mixed with how much is this okay? BDSM is a really good point around that. So is polyamory. Some of us do not come out. Some of us do not state what we want or how we want it for fear of not being accepted, for fear of not being known. So we say no to coming out most of the time because it'll hurt us. When my parents find this out, what will I do? When my friends find this out, when my work finds out what I'm into, it could really change things. There is a huge increase in breath play, in TikTok, Freak Talk, and different areas where some people are saying you should just be saying yes to all things of sex. You should just, vanilla's fucking boring. You should be doing it all the time, mate. You should be having a great time. And actually, do we really understand the risks that we take on? Sometimes we should be saying no to some things. It's really complex. I fucking hate kink talk. It's so bad. But it's really complex, isn't it? And some of the things they say are really disturbing. I looked at doing a TikTok, like as in set myself up, I'm just going to be slated. I'm an old woman who will tell people how to do things and they go, fuck off, you cunt. I'm not doing it. Sometimes it is a case of genuinely not knowing what it is that we want. I agree. Knowing that can be one of the hardest things in life. So we can take some time to try and find that out. Not hours every day, but maybe a few minutes. Jerry, coming out hurt me socially, certainly hurt my marriage, but was a savior of me. I really love the way you've put that. I think that's beautifully put. And it's really important because, again, it sits with your values. It sits with your morals. It sits with your ethics of being you. And then we have to understand that in some countries, in some places, that's impossible. And in others, in other cultures with small c's, it's absolutely open and everyone's saying, please be you. Fear of rejection or even extreme circumstances can happen for coming out. Oh, completely. Death. There are still, I can't remember what the figures were. Was it like 99 countries still being queer is illegal? I can't remember. So please don't quote me on that figure because I can't remember the exact one. But it was really shocking to me when I read it, that out of all the countries in the world, how many? Honor killing. Look at affairs. Look at somebody who's considered to have sex before marriage, especially if she is a she at that moment. Or if somebody has an affair. You think about stonings, you think about acid, you think about honor killings, you think about all these things that come in. They're quite serious. They're fucking serious. Death occurs, being sent away, things we can't do. They're horrific, absolutely horrific. And they still happen actually in the UK. I really understand that people come from different places. Let's not pretend they still happen in the UK as well. And you think about, the pressure that some societies bring on people to conform makes a real difference. Sorry, Jerry, were you going to say something? Your computer made a noise.
No, I coughed and I should turn my mic off.
It's all right. You can keep your mic on and cough. So we have to look at our risks. What do I want to do? Is this, again, this ties into in a month's time, the risk. What is the cost of this if I do it? Is it worth it in the culture that I live in the family that I live in the religion that I am? If the thought of me going to hell really is the payment, I mean, is that worth it to me? And that's something we really have to think about. So we have to align our consent with other people as well. That makes a real difference. How do we find our values, goals, and morals? Fuck me, it's really difficult. So I want to talk about retroactive withdrawal of consent in a minute. That makes a real difference. But your values, your goals, and your morals are all very different things. They really vary from person to person. So a value is an idea about what is important to you in your life, what you want to live by, and what you want to live for. They guide actions, they guide decisions. Values exist whether you recognize them or not, and they also value that they live within a culture and a society. I do despair sometimes about the lack of empathy and connection we have for one another that enable people to think and act in ways that make honour killing okay. I 100% agree with you. I can't bear to see some of the things people fucking say online, let alone the things they do. My daughter and I were talking about some friends of ours, because she's come home, and he was, Jesus. So I've known this boy, he's a man. I've known this boy for quite a long time, and about 5 or 6 years ago, all over Facebook and all over publicly, we heard that he had died. And then the truth started to come out about how he died, and it was a drug-related killing. It was a murder, and I can't believe the stuff that happened to him. He was stripped, the things that they did to him. When we hear about these things, when we hear about children, we hear about things that happen to other people, it just feels impossible that somebody could even think that way, that somebody thinks that it's okay, that somebody thinks it's a greater thing to do. The problem is a lot of our values, a lot of our ethics and morals are taken from our culture, taken from our parents, and taken from our society. And sometimes some of those are really negative. So as I said, those values exist, whether you're aware of them or not. And we can have some really nasty thoughts in our heads. Very nice people can have nasty thoughts. Very nice people can do toxic things, create toxicity, and not be very kind. Life is easier, however, when we do acknowledge our values, when we do acknowledge that they exist. I wanted the internet to allow us to live in the global village and be able to connect with everyone else in the world. That was my hope for it all. Now with social media allowing people to say such horrible things and for it to be acceptable to take such polarized positions rather than trying to connect with one another. But I'm going to argue, Simon, that that is your village. That is what people do, even in a village. There is always a gossip. There is always a person who's willing to be cruel. Towns, communities hold all of these things. It just makes it easier because we have that, it's easier to say no, fuck you, and yes, because there's no consequence. It's really easy to do, isn't it? Because we have anonymity often. So people do that. I'm really sorry, your village sucks. It's horrible. The reason why it's done, because they only care about how they are seen. Exactly. How the daughter has disrespected the family, so she needs to be gone. Honour is more important, because that value of honour matters more than anything else in those moments, for sure. The problem is, should those values, should they determine our priorities? Actually, they should, but not if they're taken on by different people in different ways. It's a subconscious guide that influences us, and that's really dangerous because that makes us say yes or no to all the wrong things. If you live a life against your core values, you will have serious mental health issues, and if not those, you will have great unhappiness. Those things absolutely do happen and do exist. So we need to think about our values. How do I want to live? How do I want to be? Because our values are what keeps us headed in our right direction. They are our system that says turn left here, turn right here, go here. This is how you park in this field to go to a medieval festival. Simon popping over one on Sunday. And I wouldn't have got there unless I'd looked at a map. I have to understand where I'm going. And I felt disorientated when I walked into this one. It's a medieval festival I've been going to for 20 plus years, but it was in a different place. It's really discombobulating. That thing always goes there, that thing always goes there. And that's what our values and our judgments and our morals, they come into that as well. We, the younger generation, see life in a different way to our parents. We live in a Western world. And again, that depends, because even if you live in a Western world, one of my clients went back to Pakistan recently, and she said, no, I'm Indian through and through. And when she went to live, it was really interesting for her to go back. She was like, fuck, that's not me at all. My values, my morals, my ethics are completely different. I kind of see where my parents are coming from, but I don't want that as my life. I want this Western ideal. And they're different ideals that clash, they're values that clash. Just been reminded that I have Scottish table and fudge from the weekend. Scottish tablet and fudge, they're different things, don't you know? One is more crumbly and one is softer. You learn a lot at a medieval festival. So, but again, the morals in that message. So we walked past this little stall with homemade Scottish tablet, and you know, she'd written all across it, it is not fudge. It was such a strong moral. She was like, it is not fudge, and don't you dare get it mixed up. A Scottish tablet is lush. It is, it's beautiful. I actually prefer fudge myself personally. I prefer the softer approach, but So we set goals all the time. We talk about, I want to go to this medieval festival. I want to be there on time. Thank you very much. Sorry, it's a real habit of mine to do accents. That's called, my first degree was performance and related arts. Sorry. I do them all the time. Don't start me off. I won't be able to stop. Very good. Very, very, very good. So when our values are then connected to our goals, the things we want to achieve, when we think about how we want to live our lives, it's values. And then people often get their values and their goals mixed up. Now I feel homesick. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. To make you feel a bit better if I do this. Do you feel a little bit more at home? A wee bit better. Go home. Go and see your people. Go home as quickly as you can. But again, you might not want to go home. Like, again, see, I would argue that Scotland is so different to different parts of the UK. Very different morals, different values, different ethics. Even when we go to Ireland or Wales, in even such a small country, my partner is Scottish, try square sausages. Do you know, it's the same with Australian. It's about it, it's all going up. So if you say certain things in Australia, like gecko or bin liner, it's really easy to say and it comes out. Fucking hell, stop. Right, so we need to set our goals. We need to set our systems about how we feel. Does this make me feel good? Is this what I want? Is this what I've been conditioned to want? Is this what I think I should want? It's really good to question that. We compare all the time. I should have this, I should have that. Social media is really bad for that. How many of us look around social media and look up? There's such an interesting discombobulation when we say, oh, I don't think I earn very well, or earning, oh no, you have to earn this much to be rich. I choose the wrong career. I didn't. I was actually on television, did all sorts actually. Yeah, did a damn good job. Spontaneous John Horrocks on Sunday. She said, oh God, help. ADHD's kicking in. So we do compare massively. I'm losing the plot. We compare massively. We've got to be really careful. There was a really interesting news night quite a few years ago where this guy was really arguing about what a terrible time he was having and how difficult it was for him, because he shouldn't be charged the amount of tax that he pays because he's not one of the big earners. But actually it turns out he earned over £80,000 a year and he's one of the top 5% in the country. The problem is there are people that hit the top 5%, but the gap between 95 and 0 isn't that big. The gap between 80k to the millions is huge. That 5% gap is the biggest place where it's at. So we tend to compare to the top. We very rarely compare around and down, which can really inform our ethics and morals and values. When people have less than us, when people are really struggling with things, it can make us more grateful for where we are and more likely to say yes or no for the right reasons. If a goal has a good value behind it, you're much more likely to achieve it. A lot of people talk about glimmers versus triggers nowadays, and in transaction analysis, we talk about warm fuzzies. They've been around for a long time as well. And it's really important to find your warm fuzzies. It's really important to find your glimmers, because they're the things that do make you feel content and happy. And if you say yes to something or no to something and it doesn't give you a warm fuzzy feeling inside, you've got to ask, does this fit with my values and my morals and my ethics? Years ago, when I started training to be a therapist, I was given a set of ethics that I had to read and learn. This was a long time ago. And there were hundreds, I think, in transaction analysis at that time. I think there were 380 something that you just had to learn off by heart. Now, you're not taught any ethics, morals, and values per se. And my ethic, my moral, it's I on no narratives. It is I, it's really true. We really have to look at my ethic, my moral, my value comes from, what would I say in a coroner's court? And that takes it to a very serious thing for me. So I don't have to learn a set. I need to look at discussions around ethics and morals of my own. And mine is, how would I explain it in a coroner's court? I'm not going to sleep with my client. That person's not going to be my friend. There's a difference in how we do things. Morals are really more about prevailing standards, behavior that's acceptable. And really, morals are also about how people are cohesive and work well in a group together. So what we want, especially in countries, in cultures, and in different areas, is that we get most people agreeing on that prevailing standard in order for that country to function. And that varies from groups to cultures to countries to nations to very different things. NATO, you behave this way, we'll protect you. That's what you've got to do. it's a set of morals, isn't it? And those principles go well over time, thousands of years sometimes, and often include quite a large personal sacrifice for the greater good. That can be really good for some people some of the time. And sometimes we need someone to sacrifice for an argument. We were speaking about, does that culture come in and go against our yes and no's and our values and what they're worth earlier? And the answer is yes. And then sometimes we need somebody to stand up and say, that isn't okay. That's not okay by me. And sometimes things go too far. I have a strong opinion about consent. I teach consent. I think consent is really important. I have workshops that last hours on consent, and they always finish with the same expression. I think we have to learn all of these things, and I think it really matters. But I also think to a certain extent, it doesn't really exist. Consent is only as good as it gets in the moment. We cannot take into account what we don't know. It's very much about risk awareness. And actually, your awareness is minimal. You do not know the physical or the psychological consequence to what you are about to do for sure. So your risk awareness is minimal. So we gain minimal consent in a moment in the world that we live in, because we're very here and now based. And that's quite different. On moral principles, as they go through time, one of the people I always quote around this who's very important is Bronnie Ware. And she did a piece of research, and then she put it into a website, and then she closed the website down and she put it into a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, or The Top Regrets of the Dying. When we're dying, you know, it's a bit too late to change things. It's really difficult, it's complex to go backwards. So we tend to look backwards because we don't have a future to look towards. And that can really help us look at, gosh, what were my morals? What were my principles? And what do they mean? If you know your values, if you're authentic to those things, if you have honesty, kindness, compassion, empathy, but you also have knowledge and you have a little bit of courage, if you have boundaries, if you have the capacity to say yes and no, actually, you can still be better even if you say yes or no in the wrong time and you fuck it up. You can be a little bit more forgiving to yourself, and that makes a difference too. It's harder. Boundaries are interesting ones, aren't they? I talk about boundaries a lot. I don't see boundaries as a stop sign or a go sign. I don't see boundaries as a yes or a no. I see boundaries as a big red love heart that joins up and keeps going. Boundaries are a huge red love heart. And they are a huge red love heart because they're all about how much I love myself and how much I love somebody else. They're really important. That's what boundaries are to me. That's my description of them. Stop. I love you. Stop. I love me. This isn't okay. I won't do that to you. You can't do that to me. I'm saying no. And listen, I'm not talking about abuse. I'm not talking about assault. I'm not talking about terrible things that happen. I'm talking about between consenting people who care for each other and your average interaction. I'm not talking about assault. You have a human right to boundaries, for sure. But people will turn around and break those boundaries all the time. People will turn around. And also, I'm a really big believer in another expression I've got written on my body is what you allow will continue. So sometimes we go too far. Hello, former Tur Hassan. Nice to meet you. We're just finishing off. The thing is, we don't carry an obvious red heart around that says this is my boundary. They have to be discussed. They have to be managed. They have to be sorted. They have to be agreed upon. They won't just happen easily. So we have to be really careful. They are part of what makes us safe on the scene. They are part of what makes things important, the things we say yes and no to. What sort of things do we need boundaries around? Sex, play, communication, relationship styles that we have, our soft and hard limits, things we're willing to experiment on and try, our emotions, our intellectual processes, our thoughts, our family, our work, politics, religion, ethics, hobbies, material boundaries we have about what we're willing to do, digital exposure. I really think it's important. Please do this, especially if you are in a DS relationship of any kind or a kink relationship. Please write out your digital policy and make it really fucking clear to everyone that this is what I would expect you to do with pictures when we've broken up, or if we break up, or if we have a disagreement. A lot of people do not look after themselves digitally, and send out pictures or don't have this, you are more likely to have more legal standpoint if you make it really certain around your digital exposure and social media exposure. And time, we have one of our biggest boundaries is time, isn't it? It isn't innate to us to respect someone else's boundaries. A baby will come right up to you. A baby will touch you. A baby will fall into you. A baby will not think about any form of boundary because they are naturally supposed to intrude upon you to learn something. So our boundaries are learned and taught to us. They're not a preference. They're not a communication unless it's clear. It's really important. Somebody said earlier that, I said no in a playful manner. I think we have to agree if we're playing with somebody whether no is a safe word or not. If no is not a safe word and we say no, it might not get listened to. A lot of people feel very strongly that you should say no and it should be listened to. But a lot of us who play on that CNC or that slightly more extreme level or in different ways want to say no as part of the game. It's much more fun. No, please don't do that to me. Please stop. We love that. No, I'm not going to listen to you. Fuck you. I'm going to do these terrible things to you. Ha ha ha. And it's good fun. So a no doesn't always get heard. So we have to remember sometimes that we have safe words or safe word systems like the red light or the traffic light system. I think it's really important to have discussions before we play. I know people don't. I've got a massive writing on negotiation. It's really fucking important. It's worth its weight in gold. If somebody is going to do something to you, then they're probably going to do something to you. Please don't get tied up the first time you meet someone. Please don't put yourself in a dangerous situation the first few times you meet someone. However, there is always a risk. But setting our boundaries, again, is not innate. Deb, which writing? What did I just say? What was I talking about there? Fuck knows, I don't know. I'm not sure which. Negotiation skills it's about. It's quite a big writing. And it also references Mr. O's negotiation skills as well, because I think it's called Negotiations, Another All You Need to Know. It's something like that. It's one of those if you're looking for it. Thank you. And it's all about how to get your negotiations on track. But the thing is, you have to know what you want before you start your negotiations. You have to know your own yeses and nos. If I think about that and I think about the consequence of that, is that something I want to do? So we're not born knowing them. We have to understand how we take charge of our lives. I love his writing. Happy to link. It's bookmarked. I'll find yours too. I've linked it in my writing because I loved it. He wrote it afterwards, I think, but I still linked it because I thought it was great. So respecting somebody else's boundaries is not innate. As I say, babies do not do that. They don't make a wall. They have to show someone the door. This is a really strong philosophy of mine. A boundary isn't a wall, it's a door. You fucking go through it. You go through it, or you send them through it. It's not a wall that stops anyone from doing anything. You don't have that much power in life. That's something we can't control. If you look at the circles of control, what can I control is a really important technique to think about. It is a door, it is not a wall. So there's a real difference when we look at that and how we work with it. So one of the things I talk about is, and it's my own hypotheses, if you don't like it, that's really okay, that moral injury, and that's about regret, it's about retroactive withdrawal of consent. It's not about a violation, it's not about abuse. Jim beat you to it. Sorry, Jerry, thank you very much. You were there first. Thank you both for looking. So moral injury, I've written about this. It's a hypothesis about regret, it's about retroactive withdrawal of consent and more. And it's another big writing that I've got, because I was reading about moral injury and it was talking about PTSD, CPTSD, burnout and different things. And I was like, fuck, that's so interesting that doctors and different people, soldiers, armies, armed forces really have to look at trauma. Moral injury, oh, thank you, Jim. Fuck me, you all in a competition. I love you all today. I'm saying yes to everyone. It's amazing. I use DBT, I use different forms of trauma therapies at different times for different reasons. But a moral injury is often a symptom for a veteran or a armed forces person or a doctor where they've had to do something that goes against their base core morals. So, for example, I had to decide which person to save. During COVID, nurses and doctors will have made decisions that they would not want to have made. In war, we make decisions that we do not want to make, that fall against and go against our it's a morally injurious event, I think, was the first person who coined it as. I'd have to look it up. So it's an idea that describes extreme and unprecedented life experience. Well, a lot of what we do also makes a real difference. Oh, somebody said not to have kinky apps on your phone. Do you know, kinky apps or kinky pics? You can hide kinky pics. They might not pop up in your photo reel, but what you've got to remember is if you cross borders and boundaries, then there are people that police, them there are borders and boundaries, have more power than the average police do. I really think about this when I go to America, and I go to America every year because of Cheer. I don't have any photos on my phone. Not only that, the other thing you have to think about is if you are arrested for a different reason and they decide to take your computers or your phones and they get into them, they are going to look at everything on there for evidence for the crime that they are investigating, and therefore can find another crime. And some of the photos that we keep as human beings are actually criminal. You cannot consent to violence against you. You cannot consent to marks that are more than trifling or transient. And there is an 1800s Act against the person, where a lot of these acts come in and these laws come in, actually fuck us up something chronic. A love bite is technically assault. So please be careful. Please be careful about the stuff you have on your phone. And actually, if you have a very obvious FetLife profile with a shit ton of pictures on it about the amount of abuse that you have created on somebody else, it's not abuse because we consented to it. It's all lovely and glorious and we love it. However, in the eyes of the law, it is. You are providing evidence. So please be careful. So, Sophie's choice, completely, Jerry. So that idea of something that really hurts us. If you have been brought up in such a way that tells you should never hit a woman if you are a man. If you've been brought up as a man, you should never hit a woman. That's not right. And then you have a BDSM experience and you thump her, or you punch her, or you do something to her. I'm using that gender specifically on purpose because I'm talking about the moral and ethics of the way we're brought up. All of a sudden, you're in trouble potentially because it's going against, it transgresses your own deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. And that's quite dangerous for us as human beings. That's where a lot of it can come. I see a lot of pics on FetLife that are definitely illegal. Oh my God, yeah, thousands, not a few, thousands. So we have to be really careful sometimes that we say yes to something, but if it goes against our morals, let's say we're taught, what was I taught about sex really? I wasn't particularly taught that sex was good or bad. I wasn't given a lot of information about sex. A lot of the stuff I took on about sex as a child was that it's something that a woman has to do. My mum didn't particularly like sex. I always knew when my dad had managed to have sex, there was a towel outside their bedroom door, which I know now that my mum would put a towel down. She couldn't stand the thought of any fluids being on the bed. Everything had to be clean and tidy. My mum had quite chronic OCD, quite difficult to live with, to say the least. So sex was a real issue with that. I remember years later, my mum had a hip replacement and it comes with a sex pamphlet. If you ever have a hip replacement, it comes with a sex pamphlet on how to have sex. And the one thing you can't do is the good old vanilla missionary position because it forces the hips open. So it recommends that and it's so fucking heterosexual, but let's still go with it, that the woman straddles the man with her hips slightly apart and he thrusts up into her. And I looked at this sex port, the thing, and I just looked at my mum and dad and I said, not gonna happen. And my dad said, no, never. And it's because that's the way I've been brought up around my mum. Like it just doesn't happen. But I watched my dad's mood swings change as to when he had sex and what happened. So in order to make my dad happy, my mum would have sex at least once a week so my dad would be nicer to be around. That's that conditioning that we're brought into. So for me, sex is like, what if I want sex then? How do I do that? You have to think about that. So people are also saying, Fergal said, Feargal said, when you bring your computer to a repair shop, expect them to take copies of any kinky photos that you have on your hard drive. Yeah, or actually look you up on FetLife because they're already on there, because most of us geeky, nerdy people are already on FetLife as it goes. So again, knowing that something that goes against our moral values and can really create trauma means that we're not saying yes or no to the right things for us. If we've been brought up in such a conservative or restrictive or moral way, or too liberal indeed, it makes a real difference. Sex before marriage is a big no-no, or you're seen as a slut in certain culture. I know many a person, for example, who will have anal sex before they're married so that they're still a virgin. Work that one out. That's quite interesting, isn't it? You're not a slut, it's anal, but actually then anal will send you to hell. Now what do we do? It's just, of course there are, but actually if you really want to go on a lot of religious books, you wouldn't be able to do a lot of things. You'd never get divorced. You'd be stoned in a lot of, when you go back to really biblical type teachings on different religious books for different reasons. You can't mix your cotton with your linen. You honestly, there are so many things you can't do in order to be alive, in order to be okay. If we followed everything, it's interesting that people only pick out certain morals and ethics in order to suit them from all these religious books that we have everywhere that says this is the way it should be. It's very different to actually what's written in a lot of them as well. It's really worth reading all of them to find out what is actually written in all of them. So this moral injury is a term. It's when we have that experience and the aftermath of that, what it does to us. And one of my hypotheses I'd quite like to do, I'm not going to fucking do it, and Jerry go and roll his eyes because I'm saying it again, but I'd quite like to do a PhD on this. I want to read it. I don't want to do it. Reading all of them. Yeah, there are so many different religious scripts and textures if you want to, or a synopsis, but then you miss all the little bits that you really are important. So a lot of people like reading all of them, actually. A lot of people have. So if you understand that sometimes our yeses and nos are based on other people's morals and ethics, then we can feel really regretful about something that we do. Now, for example, Ash, you've just said you're seen as a slut in certain cultures. PhD. Still got 2 I want to write, so maybe one day. So if sex before marriage and you're seen as the village bike, the slut, the whore, the easy one, the one who gave out, that might be so morally injurious to you that if you did a gangbang and you had a fantastic time and you loved it, actually 4 days later, all those injurious, moral, very difficult conversations come up. And it's really difficult. Yeah, I've read the Quran and the Bible. I wouldn't disagree with you, Ash. There are so many similarities. I never get why certain religions fight so much. You're all on the same, we've all got the same fucking principles. Context as well is really important, because with religious books, a lot of things are taken out of context, 100%. And read with an intention to harm others, not always, but generally speaking. I would be dead, Debs, if I was seen as a slut. I totally understand and appreciate that. Not as much as I could do. I'm not in your shoes. And what I'm also saying is, in different cultures at different times, if somebody, they might actually really not be okay with what they did personally as well, because all of that attitude comes into ourselves and we say yes or no for the right and wrong reasons. So I'm really sorry that you're in that situation. It can't be easy. I feel for you totally. So moral injury is quite difficult. I think what do we do? Years ago, I had a young woman walk into my therapy room and she said to me, I always ask, like, why are you here? What are you looking for? Where would you want to be in 6 months? What would this therapy look like? What would the interest would be? And she said, I'm a good Christian girl. It's an interesting start. Okay. And you're here for, I need conversion therapy. Now, I've had a lot of experience. 60, 70, 80,000 hours of experience. I always say you often hear the same story again and again in a different way. That was a fucking first for me. I want conversion therapy. I want to be able to go to heaven. Please, can you stop me from being a lesbian? Because I like women. I mean, my answer was clearly no. Still worked with her and we had a great time working together. But kink and poly are interesting. If we're brought up not to be sexually in certain ways, or not to hurt other people, or to get too much pleasure from something, on average we're brought up to be monogamous. Not everyone all the time everywhere. I also understand that the dream is to have a marriage, a dog, 2.2 children and a white picket fence. So actually it can be really traumatizing if our standard isn't fulfilled. Nessie New says, quite true, Catholic guilt. Yeah, Jewish guilt, Catholic guilt, they're quite driven. You shouldn't wear condoms. You shouldn't take any form of contraception. Big lessons. Ash, it gets drummed into you from an early age that you will go to hell if you do naughty stuff, for sure. Lots of religions are guilty of traumatizing a lot of people for very wrong reasons, as our cultures. And they influence our yes and our no. We need to practice saying yes and no in the right circumstances. We need to understand our values, our morals, our ethics to make a real difference. We've got about 5 minutes left. What question would you like to ask? What things haven't I quite covered? Judaism, Catholicism, guilt, ritual, the gateway drugs, and BDSM. Maybe so. Although one thing I like about Judaism, for me, having been brought up a Jewish woman, although not religious at all, is I like the idea of heaven and hell being within us rather than somewhere we go. We have those choices to be good or bad and what that means. So I do get that. Simon, it's really funny, really, being a slut flirt was seen as a good thing with the polyam crowd I used to run with. Only now, one of that crowd is framing that behaviour in a very negative way. Interesting how people can shift to suit the narrative that they need. 100%. Not only do people shift narratives because they want to have a different argument that suits them, and I think what we've also got to remember is people also change, fundamentally change about how they live life and how they see people. Techniques. I think I've given at least about 10 so far, all the way through. What at least. So if you want a specific technique, what would you like? So talk to me about what technique you like around things, because I've given quite a few through all of this, different things that you can do, different ways of saying things, different ways to practice. Finding your own values, morals. Do a topic on why people won't come out and the reasons behind it, please, Debs. I can definitely do that one day. I can do that. Oh, I wasn't asking. I was aware of things from thank you. I think Jerry said techniques. Jerry, you were the one who did say techniques, actually. So would you like anything else? I've done at least 10 or whatever. When might we see the wisdom of Debs collected in a book? Do you know what I did today? Encouraged by somebody else who keeps going to put their own code in and everything. I've actually even started a group on FetLife that's going to have my writings in some kind of system.
Oh God, we haven't been talking about it for 3 years or anything, have we?
Oh no, but this person's just they're gonna do all the coding and make it really work. And I thought, oh, I don't have to do a thing for that. That sounds so lovely. So I love them already. But yes, Jerry's gonna help me write a book.
Yeah, I love doing that kind of shit. You know I do.
I know you do. So I don't think it's my wisdom. I think it's wisdom I've picked up over the years and I've bastardized it. Group link is please. Oh shit. I think it's on, if you look at my profile, it says groups I lead. I think it's on there. I think it says Kink Shrink Scribblings or something. It's like that. I just called it a facetious, stupid name. So it's on Fet. Yeah, it's on FetLife. I don't really go anywhere else. And Poppy and I were talking about doing these specialist weekends, but what I've realized is actually weekends don't work. People don't want to come to courses. People don't want to be things. So in order to also monetize slightly, but not massively, I'm going to, at some point, add to all of this. I'm going to do a set of teachables as videos on all these subjects so people can see it as a course. No, that's not a parrot. That is a cuckoo clock. It's an electronic one. I have a real one because my mum was Swiss. Is this recording posted somewhere for us to watch? Yes, it is posted on FetLife if you are a member, but then I also put a link underneath it every time I do it onto the YouTube video. If it hasn't been recorded, it's normally on London Alternative Markets YouTube. If it hasn't been recorded, I then send them, and I'll put that in. I send them to David Cosmic, and he puts them on, and I put a link.
I can't see Cosmic in the group tonight.
Yeah, it's all right. I record it. I can always send it off to him. That's my email address if you want a certificate. Don't all send me weird stuff. I will block you and tell you to go fuck yourself. I like to be quite direct. So anyone want anything for the last 3 minutes, a technique or something that might help about in a certain situation? I think I've covered a fair few, but if I haven't covered enough and you want one specifically, let me know. If not, I have a Patreon. I don't charge for these. You don't have to pay for them. I have a Patreon and a coffee under the Kink Shrink. If you want to donate, please do. And if you don't, it really doesn't matter. Some people have money, some people don't. It really varies, and I appreciate any support that I get. Look forward to the next one about risks. Me too. So any recommendations for books other than the ones you've mentioned on yes and no? There aren't a lot of books on yes and no. I would look for books that, oh God, Jesus Christ. What I'm going to do, I have a FetLife post on films, and I'm going to do one on books as well, recommendations that people have psychologically, so we get thousands in there. I reckon that'd be quite cool, but we have mentioned 3 or 4. Nessie, thank you so much. Deb's really appreciated your guidance. Oh, thank you. Lovely to meet you, team. Thank you very much. That's really kind of you. See some of you at Lamb on Sunday. If you're coming to Lamb, come and say hello to me. Come and say hi. I remember the films one, yeah, it went a bit mad. This was all super informative. I'll be back in the future. Thank you so much. Are these Thursdays now monthly or still fortnightly? I haven't been able to get to some, so I'm out of the loop. On average, I try and do them every 2 weeks, but I'm going to be in Egypt for the next one, so it will be a month's time. So in a month. Thank you for this platform. You're really welcome. Oyster, thank you so much. You're really welcome. Thanks as always. Right. So yeah, the next one will be in a month. And as always, please do follow me, the Kink Shrink. Then you can say that you're coming. Not this one. I'm more like to make Mank ones at some point soon. All right, come down. All right, just travel. Thank you. I will have a lovely holiday, I'm sure. Debs gives brilliant hugs. I do try. If you want a hug, I'm a hugger. I will not naturally go to hug you because I really believe in consent. So if I say, is it all right? Do you want a hug? I do ask. So just tell me you want a hug. And that I might see some of you on Sunday. So wank away, look like a bunch of idiots. Thank you very much for coming. I hope everyone's got a little something out of today, and we will be covering risk very soon. See you later. Thank you. Thanks, Erin. See you later. Bye, Caris. Bye, Ropes. Bye, everybody. See you later. Bye.